got a black and white Warbler for this painting. It's a 10 by 7 inch transparent watercolor. I got photos of this guy at McGee Marsh in Ohio. And I painted black and white Warblers before, but it's been a long time. It's probably been about 17 years since I had done one. So I got some nice photos of this guy and thought, oh, that'd be fun to do. And in doing it, one of the things that appealed to me was kind of doing a misty kind of background where it disappears into the back. I thought that would be really cool to do. I first get it off the main portions so I could get in a nice kind of smoky background. And I did apply most of that. Some of it I used a little tiny tool to get the little details in and really keep all the edges sharp. And putting on the frisket is not a quickie job. You've got to really take your time to make sure it goes on just where you want it to be. And there was the seedy area of the that I'm putting in now was difficult to do the frisket for because it had all these little filamentous parts of the flower of the ash. So I put in a nice wet on wet wash so I would have the pigment crawl across the page and have a nice smoky smooth background. And then as it's set up, I brought in some streaks of some darker colors so I'd have an indication that some of these branches continued in the background. I like having some areas kind of come into focus, so once I have the smoky kind of part of the background with the really blurred out details, I'll start bringing in some layers where I'll apply paint to it, where I'll start seeing crisp edges and I'll start getting that contrast. And that's where you see me doing this now. I'm usually hitting it with the hairdryer pretty frequently in between, just to control what's dry on the paper and what's wet. In some of these areas I knew I was going to want to have more contrast, so I'm building that in now with some of those greens. And getting fairly dark in some places. I was trying to control where the bird was. I wanted to have it light so I could have good contrast with the blacks of the bird. Once I was happy with the background, I peeled off the frisket and then transferred the rest of the sketch using tracing paper and a folding bone. And then went about just putting in the lightest local colors throughout the rest of the painting, covering that canvas. Most of this was done at this stage with a number 6 round brush, and then I later switched to a number 2. I pretty much never use blacks, even though the bird is a black and white warbler. I don't use black in my palette. I'll use other colors and then ease up to the dark colors that approach black, and then start bringing in, use alizarin crimson and phthalo green mixed together to make a blackish color. One of the challenges with this guy was it had these moss-covered logs that the bird was perched on. And those are fun to paint because you're doing them kind of loosely and you kind of build the detail as you go, but it's also just a tricky thing to have look right. Especially the transition from the bottom of the branch, which is kind of brownish, and then you start getting the mosses on the top and lichens where the water collects. So it was a fun challenge. I think I've switched over a number 2 round here at this point, and then for the bird I actually pulled out a 5 or 10-aught brush just to do some of the little details. And you can see I'm using a magnifier to do some of these little details that get swung in and out of the way. Some of the things like the feet and the eyes and the beak, I need a little help to get that detail in there. One of the other things I do a lot is I rotate the paper, and that doesn't make for a great video necessarily because it's kind of harder to follow, but the advantage of that is that sometimes your hand moves in a particular way, or you need to get the canvas closer to yourself so you're not painting over the table. So it's a good idea to move that canvas around to make sure you're comfortable when you're doing it. These box elder trees have those little, I think it's box elder, but they have those, the maple family have those tiny little filamentous flowers that are interesting, but those things are hard to paint in watercolor. So there are a couple of those on the right side of the painting that were a different sort of challenge. And you can see that in the painting I kind of had, it was super contrasty, and I basically had a white sky behind the thing, and you know, some blurry background elements that I thought distracted. So when I was working from a bunch of photos, not just the one that I printed there, I kind of selected to have the scene a little bit different. So I cleared the background behind the bird and made it more of a misty green instead of just that deadly white behind the bird. Which I thought competed in a few ways. It made it harder to see the details of the whites of the bird if you're on the white, and I thought that if I played with some of that light green, I'd be able to bring in some of those green and kind of a little bit yellowy tones to the bird's feathers to round it out. A lot of time was spent picking around at these little mosses and green licheny areas, and then trying to bring those colors up into the belly of the bird so it looked like it was actually in the environment with those reflected shadows. And you can see I'm using some purple to bring in the shadows into the stump. One of the things I like to do is I do like using purple for shadows, and especially it plays really nicely with burnt sienna and some of the other browns in making a really rich color to bring into those browns. So I'm pretty much finished at this point. So there you go, a black and white Warbler, 10 by 7 inch transparent color. Thanks for watching. If you get a chance, leave a comment or have a peek at the blog or website.